This is a Film Stories original podcast.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale. I am a writer and film critic, and today I am delighted to be joined by Rob Spera. He has written a book which I read through twice. It's a beautiful looking book as well. It's called The Film TV Director's Field Manual, and it is a sort of, well, it's exactly what it says it is. It's a manual, a how-to manual that is full of practical maxims and advice on how to approach everything from a filmmaking perspective. Rob, in your introduction, you mentioned that this book came out of one of your students sort of putting together some of your quotes as a teacher.
Yeah. Portland Tagabi was a student in my classes at the American Film Institute about, maybe 8 years ago. And at the end of the 2-year program, she kind of orchestrated this collection of quotes of mine from the students that they thought had the most value to them. And she's also an illustrator, so she provided some great illustrations, very fun, funny, and also it was the first time I saw how I might be able to craft all of my basic concepts into these simple, highly distilled maxims that went beyond just the quote itself, but actually filled in all the details so a student could actually assimilate them quickly. One of the challenges I felt with most filmmaking textbooks, I own them all. I have great respect for those writers and those filmmakers, but I could never really, I found myself getting through a chapter and a half before I would just abandon the book. And not because they were wrong or they were not well written, but they were just so detailed and so dense that I found I couldn't bring it didn't find its way into my work on a regular basis. So I set out to write something that was basically the next extension of the quotes that Portland put together that allowed me to kind of distill these concepts to their essence. So they're immediately accessible. They're very small, right, up front in the practicality, but they have mighty ramifications down the road as we continue to apply them to our work. And so the book is there to, all of these maxims in some form or another were in my binder on set all the time. So I would start my day as they were lighting. I would just refresh myself as to what the job is, right? What the task is, right? Where my focus should be, because there are too many places to be distracted and you're on a movie set. You can lose track of the real purpose. So I would always refresh myself every morning with them. And so essentially they're the next extension of that. So you keep it on set. It's designed so the cover is sturdy. The book can fit in your back pocket. It's there to refer to on a daily basis when you're on set and through the course of a day or pre-production and even post. So it's meant to make the work accessible and practical, so you can have really kind of long-lasting, deeper meaning results with your work.
I know we have a lot of filmmakers or aspiring filmmakers among our listenership, and so I really do recommend this. As you say, it's perfectly pocket-sized to have in your back pocket at all times, or having with your stuff so that you can take it on set with you.
Absolutely.
Could you tell us a little bit about your background in terms of your introduction into filmmaking? And you mentioned already that you were in AFI both as a student, I think, and then you went later on as a teacher.
Yeah, I actually started out as an actor, and I studied with Stanford Meisner in New York. And I thought acting was it for me. And then I discovered directing, because what I essentially did, I was a young character actor. I wasn't getting any work, and I didn't want to wait 20 years, right, to learn just the craft in total. So I started producing theater so I could actually work. And so I would produce so I could act, and then I kind of stumbled into directing in these producing jobs. And once I started directing, I realized there's no going back. So I started producing that around, small productions around New York, and then within a few months, I was directing all over the country. Started a stage directing career, but after about 6 or 7 or 8 years of that, you're working at the best theaters, but you're also going broke. So I knew that eventually I wanted to find my way back to movies, which were my first love, right? And that was, I did a lot of, I basically stopped working for about a year. I did a bunch of research, and I wanted to figure out where's the best place to be. I wanted to be at a place where I could further my directing craft as well as build a business profile. And I generally always use a 5-year plan in these transition periods, especially. So the 5-year plan set out, I wanted to be directing feature films within that 5-year period as I was leaving the theater, and all by design. And then I figured out the American Film Institute had the best training, which it still does, I think. And also it has a high business profile. So that seemed the place to go. I applied, got in, and went there. But most importantly, I've always had this attitude about not going to the industry to be validated. I've always wanted to just do the work, especially in those early years, my early 20s. So I did that in theater. I just started producing so I could learn. I wanted to be learning the process, not working at a bar or a restaurant. So in the early stages, I just started teaching. I don't know what the hell I was teaching, but I started teaching. And that's something I've kept, right? I have never stopped teaching in the past 40 years, because that's where all the learning takes place for me, for the most part. Once I finished film school, I wanted to create the same thing I had in theater. So I set about directing a string of low-budget B movies. And I treated that with the same intensity I treated my training at the American Film Institute, which I always went into each project knowing what I was going to be studying this particular time. I took very accurate records. I would compare my wins, which were a few, and then also my mistakes, big and small, and then try to fix them in the next project. So it was a long period of, not long, probably about 20 or 25 low-budget features in which there were no adults, supervising. As long as I delivered the genre requirements, no one cared. So I could do whatever I wanted. I could experiment in any way I needed to. And that gave me the opportunity to build my craft. Now, much of what is in this book, was all kind of starting to cobble together in those early years. And the key is, that was also part of a 5-year plan I was working, where I wanted to build this little film school for myself. But then it came time to leave that behind, So I directed a lot of movies that would never see the light of day beyond, the rack at Blockbuster at the time. And important to note that I treated every one of those projects as if I could take them to the Academy Awards, right? Now, I knew we were not going, I didn't buy a tux, but I had to bring that kind of a mentality to set, I never looked down at the material, the people I was working with. I was always trying to elevate, to find a way to preach, those sermons. And because you're not going to learn anything if you don't show up, fully, engaged, and trying to make that script that you have not a lot of faith in terms of its basic, storytelling, and make it as best as you possibly can. So I think that attitude is where I was able to learn as much as I did, because I always tried to elevate everything. But then it came a point where I had to stop doing that. I said, okay, now we're done. You've learned. You're done. You will continue to learn to some degree, right? But you've got the basics now. And basically, my 5-year plan, which became an 11-year plan, basically said, I will never, ever, ever again be on a movie set unless I can speak for the material in my own voice. All right. And I said, I don't know how long that will be, but that's the vow I made in that 11-year plan. And what turned out to be an 11-year plan. And in the meantime, I started directing television so that I could just stay fresh, keep working. My family liked to eat. And there I also found a lot of ways to learn. Right. I love the speed of television and finding ways to engage the actors and finding ways to reinvent sets that you're inheriting was always a lot of fun. But I guess then finally I found in that search, right, I found a script I wanted to invest in time-wise. And that was a movie called The Sweet Life. And that's that was my first, book foray back into feature films. And we're going through another big shift right now. And I think being really cognizant of these changes. So I'm really taking a break from narrative scripted, and I moved into documentary work because I think in many ways it's also, I don't read fiction, I read nonfiction, right? So for me, it's a really kind of a natural transition. And I think just until we figure out where the hell everything is going, I want to keep working, and documentary is new and different. And that's where I'm headed right now. But I think the running theme for me has always been do the work and the career and the money will follow. Never focusing on just, I want to be famous or I want to be rich, I want to be well-liked. Just do the work. The work is what saves us. There are lots of down periods in our career, right? As you know, and how do you navigate those periods, right? So I wanted to find ways so I always committed to the work, and that is what's given me my education. That's what has always saved me. That's what really keeps me fresh. And the most important thing to me over 40 years of working in the industry now, I am more passionate and excited by my work than I was way back when at 22, because I've kept a really close eye on my pilot light as an artist, and I protect it, and also I know that I have to work, so I work. I don't look down my nose at anything. In our business, I think becoming an artist in film, especially, is a lifetime goal, and I don't want to I don't want to get lost in myself or my vanity or ego. I want to be learning and growing and getting better. So that's pretty much the approach. Long answer to a very short question, but I apologize.
I've got a few questions.
Sure.
So we're going to skip back a little bit, but I do want to emphasize that's exactly what I took from the book, that there are these very practical points, but there's also this coherent, consistent sort of philosophy or ethos that runs all the way through all the maxims. They all sort of coalesce into this sort of war against cynicism, this enthusiasm for the art form, this sincerity in doing it. So a few questions that I want to skip back and get some sort of specific answers to. One was when you're talking about low budget films, how low are you talking about? What's the situation in terms of, how big is your crew?
So the very first one I shot when I was still at school at AFI. And it was a film called Witchcraft. We made it for $85,000, and it has spawned, I think, 15 sequels. So 16 films in the franchise and 15 sequels, all done for less. So that's why I stepped out of that chain. It seemed to be going in the wrong direction fast. But yeah, so that was the first one. And those things at the time were that one was shot in 14 days. But that was one of the longer shoots that I've had. Then I did a string of low budget, thrillers, erotic thrillers, action pieces that were all in the range of about 200 to 250,000. And those schedules were between 10 and 12 days long. So I'm not far from what a TV schedule might be, but you're doing it with a very small crew of probably about 30 people. So you can move pretty quickly, but you're many people wearing many hats,
Right.
all trying to get the job done. And what I always made sure that right from the start on all of those films, the props person would come to you and say, I see what you want about this, but we don't have enough money. And my answer to that is, do not talk to me about money. Do not talk to me about time, right? Because time and money always win, right? Yeah, okay. But come to me with an idea, solve it for me. And together we'll find our way to a better solution. Maybe not the best solution, but throughout that low budget period, I would refuse to discuss time and money. It was just an easy way out. And in fact, with movies, you're always doing your best work when you get narrow, right? The more you narrow the point of view, the more you narrow what you see, is you're able to actually begin to focus on what's most important, which is the human beings, right, on the screen. And I think that is really one of the key things I took from those very tight schedules. And I loved working because you're always you have so few backup plans. There are always problems, people coming late, people not showing up, people not really being good at what they do yet. And so as a director, you're being tested on your feet. And my prayer every day to set, I never told anyone this, but my prayer was that I hope we have a problem today. I really hope something goes wrong so that we can fix it, right? So we can be under the gun. And generally, when we're fixing, it's getting better. So I always like to think that, when there's a problem on set, it's not meant to be what we intended. There's some other better solution out there, and we're going to find it now. So having that kind of a positive attitude working through those periods is really critical.
It must be also a liberating feeling, sort of working with that sort of budget and knowing, okay, we're not going to the Oscars. I can try things out. I can try to do the best version of this possible. It gives you a certain space to fail as well.
Yeah, it gives you a great, because expectations are low. And what it's able to teach you is a disposition on set. So I'm able to carry that same feeling of freedom to all professional settings, right? So when I show up on a movie that I really care about, I'm as freewheeling as I was on those, right? Because it became a habit, right? It became a part of the process. So yeah, great freedom, really liberating. And what you discover is that you're going to do your best work when you're that open-minded about everything, when you're not allowing fear to invade the process, because fear is going to lead us down some very dark paths in terms of the work. So it's exactly what you're saying. It's so much fun to work like that, and why not do it all the time? So I think one of the maxims in the book, we talk about listening to your movie. And that's really what I learned from all that low budget work. It's the movie's talking to you, right? You can do all the prep work you want. You can work on it for months. You can have your shot list and all your blocking. I always have 3 to 5 versions of a scene. So it's not about showing up and making it up. It's about being highly prepared and then improvising. Then you look at what the world is treating you to. Then you look at what the weather is giving you. Then you look at the personalities of your actors on the day. Then you look at the scene, and you're looking at all that in its immediacy. And you're trying to capture stuff that's fresh and immediate, and you don't want to necessarily bring all those tired plans you've kind of drilled yourself through over the course of the past several months. That's, for me, is the starting point. And now real life is entered, and we're trying to capture that, right, with a camera. So getting away from anything that feels really staged or dry is always, for me, the goal. How you bring that freshness to the table, because the camera is like a microscope, and the camera sees it all, and you want to capture that immediacy.
Yeah, and there must be a temptation as well, and this is another maxim that you have in the book, when the time is short and money is tight, to skimp on safety measures. And you make the point very clearly that not a drop of blood should be shed making a film.
Yes.
And you bring up the recent examples specifically of Rust, which everybody knows about, where the cinematographer was killed. And that must be a temptation at that, that let's get the show must go on. We must go to every extreme to pick up a shot.
Both of the references in my book, the deaths and onset deaths on my book were touched me, closely. One, Helena went to the AFI, and Sarah was on my sets in a TV series called Army Wives, and but even beyond that, it's movie sets are dangerous. It's not a joke. And I think it's up to the director to set a really high standard right up front. Right, like I say in the book, no film is worth a single drop of blood. And we've got to, we have these safety protocols in movies. And before a stunt or on the day of a stunt, everybody comes together and we say, hey, this is a safety protocol and blah, blah, blah. We want to be safe. Here's how we're going to be safe. Everybody watch out for this, watch out for that. But that those always feel to me like a just obligation. And I don't know that they're shifting our focus enough in the way that we need to. So it's for the director to set that standard. And I think sometimes we can unwittingly urge people into situations that are not safe. Even just saying how important a particular shot is for me to get. So the pressure that might place on my location manager, on my DP, to push the boundaries to get that for me. I think we've got to make it really clear as directors that we are not going to get shots that are either illegal, unsafe, unplanned, to the point that they need to be planned. We've got to be a really vocal proponents right up front every day and make sure that everyone's there taking their best shot at safety, because that kind of laziness that kind of laziness can really set a tone that trickles down all the way to the PAs, and you can find your people in unsafe conditions before you know it. So being a vocal proponent, I think, is really important for all directors. You're at the top of the food chain, on set anyway, and you need to make it clear to everyone how important safety is to you. Everyone gets to go home tonight. That has to be a rule.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, again, with your book, there is a sense that you are trying to rectify a sort of image of the director that maybe was sort of established in the 1970s as this sort of, maverick genius who shouts at everybody, and I don't want to hear excuses. I want, takes hundreds of takes to get the perfect shot, the perfect wave or whatever, and doesn't and it's obnoxious. Obnoxiousness as a sign of genius. And your point is, no, you've got to learn people's names. You've got to treat people like human beings. You'll get more out of them.
Yes, yeah, and you want to create a community that you'd like to be part of. When you set out to make a movie, you have this a community of artists coming together, and you want to create a tone of positiveness, of openness, of support, of love, and you don't want to, because otherwise you're going to create a community that is not fun to be a part of, number one, and two, you're not going to get their best work. They're going to be afraid to come to you with crazy ideas, unorthodox ideas, and you want to be able to encourage them to do that. You don't want to stay in a very linear plane when you're working. You really want to encourage a thinking outside the box mentality, but that doesn't happen when people are scared. People think they're going to be demeaned or fired. You really want to, your job is to, I think, to point the direction, point to the vision, and then let your coworkers carry you there, right? Let them, right, participate. Otherwise, what is the fun in it for them? What do they get out of it? And, whenever I've done that, my movies have always prospered. It's when I had to be the smartest guy in the room, where I always had to be in charge. I put the badge on. It was more about my ego and vanity than it had to do with actually making a movie with human beings, about human beings. So the idea is to shift away from that, and you really put your finger on it. Because I don't really say it out loud, because I had a specific maxim about this, but I thought it went too far. But I'll share it here with you, since you've identified this. I really am not a fan of the auteur theory. Right. I think it's a fucking insult to so many talented, skilled filmmakers, right, to put your name above their work and say, I made this. Well, not really. You pointed the direction, and you helped keep us on track. But all these people, they brought contributions to the table that are seen and unseen, and they need to be recognized. So the auteur theory, I think, is something that, there are probably 2 or 3 filmmakers at any given time that deserve that title. And great. But it's a big industry. There are a lot of us working, and I don't know if we get the best work from people when we're simply shutting them out, especially on something that's so collaborative. If you look at, a painter picking up a brush and with some paint and a canvas, okay, you're the author of that. Got it. If you are a musician and you write, a composer, you write that, okay, that's yours. Got it. But movies, there are so many moving parts. There are so many ways to contribute, even if you're just listening to the director, right? Even if you're just providing sounding board, right, through your point of view and nodding your head as they speak. That's collaboration. I don't need to speak up and say, no, do it this way. Just simply speaking to me, bouncing the idea off of me, seeing the look in my eyes, seeing whether I smile or not, seeing my reaction, or nodding my head, or shaking my head, right? So I think we've got to let go of that for a number of reasons. And if you still want to keep it from a very self-serving reason, the work gets better when you open the door, right, in this way.
I think it reminds me of an interview Orson Welles once did, where he talked about certain directors having great reputations that were unearned because being a director, they could sit back and let everybody else do the work, and as long as they didn't interfere, the films were fine. They didn't. So they could. Everybody would go, "What a great director!" They actually no. The best decision they made was not to interfere in other people's work.
That's right. Stay in the dressing room. We'll take care of this for you. Absolutely.
One of the elements of filmmaking, television, and theatre, obviously, is obvious. One major element is going to be your actors. And I loved the section you devote to directing performance. And again, it sort of goes with this idea of lightly, not to to approach laterally some of the problems. You're not approaching them head on. It's not confrontational. It's about. There was a lovely example of you wanted a little bit more emotion out of an actress, and instead of asking her or directing her, overtly in front of the crew, you just gave her a tissue to put up her sleeve in case she needed it, and that informed her of what she needed to convey.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for seeing that. It's really. First, you have to understand, I think, that the camera is like a microscope, and the camera sees everything. It sees direction. It sees when you're just kind of puppeting the actors, and you don't get the best. And if you're asking directly, especially when we're talking about emotions, we can't approach them directly. We've got to approach them indirectly, and usually through the use of props. And also with the understanding that emotion in the actors is not required. It's emotion in the audience that's required. And we tend to construct those things. So for me, instead of telling the actor that in the scene you're talking about, she plays a lieutenant colonel, and she's giving a press briefing regarding a bombing that had taken place nearby that her husband was actually injured in, and she doesn't have any real knowledge yet as to what his condition is, if he's going to live or not. So while she's giving this briefing, she has this on her mind, and one of the challenges, right, is making sure the actor is committing to the objective at that point, which is to communicate information and not just get lost in the emotion. And the other thing is, as an actor, whenever she put the uniform on, it stiffened her, right? She got stiff in the process. She felt this obligation to become more, I guess, military-like or masculine. And it stifled her very great emotional process. So I wanted to give her something because it's a big scene. It's 150 extras. I wanted to give her a way to look through, right? Just as a gentle reminder that this scene also has some emotional values in it. So right before we ran, I just ran up to her and I slipped a Kleenex tissue in her sleeve, as you pointed out. And I said, just in case. And what it told her, in a sense, is that, there's an emotional value in this scene. It's part of this. It's not that important, but just know that it's there. And that tissue is what softened her and gave her, another window on all of this. And I think it's important too, right? We don't think enough about how to use physical elements or props. It's movies are visual storytelling, right? And when we commit to that storytelling visually, right, we can move an audience. And I think it's most of the way I like to work is to not talk about the scene. Film scenes are very short. They are 2 minutes long or 3 minutes long. They're generally simple human transactions that the actors have lived through many times before, right? They're very easily contained and controlled. So there's scenes of interrogation, scenes of reconciliation, love scenes of seduction. They understand them. And so what you want to do is not talk about the scene and all of its values. You simply provide them with the blocking that's going to frame the beats that informs the performance. So we're really not directing performances on camera. We're actually informing performances on camera. And the blocking is the way we frame the beats and what their objectives and obstacles are. And we're essentially empowering the actor to take it to the next level. I don't want them to do what I do. I don't want them to think of it in the way I would think of the scene. I want them to actually follow their own instincts. So in my rehearsals, I always start each rehearsal in this way, which is to say, I have some ideas about the scene, but I'm going to need your help with them. I think she comes through the door. I think she sits at some point. I think she goes to the bar and maybe she makes a drink. I'm not really clear on that. And then she might stop at the window at some point, and there's the blinds there. Maybe she closes them. Now, from a preparation standpoint, I know exactly where I want her to do all of those things. I know exactly to the blink of an eye how I think that should work. But what I want to do is empower her, the actress, to walk that path, right, using her own instrument and find out where and how and when all those things happen because it keeps them alive and fresh. They're not being manhandled and pushed around the set. They're finding it themselves, and the audience and the camera being treated to an immediacy in the thought process, an immediacy in what she's feeling. And that's how you get them to do their best work. If you're looking for those magical performances, you really want to prepare within an inch of your life and then allow what looks like an improvisation. But in fact, they're on a very specific path, a very tight path that I've laid out for them that I know works from my point of view. And now I want them to find their way to it. And then they come to full emotional life in that way. Otherwise, you're inserting yourself into the work in some cases, just because you think it's going to work better, or our ego gets involved, and you think there's only one way to solve a scene. But I trust by now that I'm never the smartest person in the room, and I really want to lean on the people around me to I'll do all my work. I want them to bring the work to the next level.
I have so much admiration for actors having been on set and seeing just how unnatural an environment it is.
Yes.
So it feels like there's a behind the scenes picture of Stanley Kubrick directing Dr. Strangelove, and it's a scene with the only female character, the secretary in a bikini on a bed, and the camera is above her, and it's gigantic. And the way she plays that scene when you watch the film, the best bit of acting she does is the fact that you don't know there's a massive camera above her that is watching her. You know, she looks like somebody's lying on a bed.
Exactly. The amount of pressure on them, right? As just the size of the equipment, all of the theatrics happening, right on the other side of the camera. And then they have to kind of etch these really frail human emotions. It's when they can do it well, it's a beautiful thing to watch.
Absolutely. And you talk about one of the tools in the director's toolbox as being the silent take, which is, I published recently a book about Terrence Malick, and this was a technique that he used many times. And I think Days of Heaven is almost entirely made of silent takes, in fact.
Wow. Yeah.
So this is it's interesting to read it in your book as well as this possibility for a director to get a lot of material.
Yeah. I love that Malick did. I'm a big fan, and to know that it's been done for. I preach all the time that basically all these tools have existed for over 100 years, right? They've been used, right? No one of us is actually inventing anything new, but there are some tried and true principles, and the silent take is an amazing piece because where dialogue is not the most important factor in a scene, the writer will tend to overwrite because they're not fully aware as to what the visual elements will bring to the table. And then the actor gets lost sometimes in just the dialogue. So as seen in many cases, if you allow the actors to run a full take on camera silently, it's going to force them to stop thinking about dialogue and think about what's actually happening between me and this other actor and what's happening in the scene. And they tend to focus there. And so I think performances improve. I also think that we get additional material, pauses, that are really filled with tension, and have to do more with not what's said, but what's left unsaid, so that their performances are even more enriched in the cutting room. And the silent take is used to give us. For me, I also use it to give me insight into whether or not the scene is working. Because if I can do a silent take and strip out all the dialogue, if I don't have full support of the visual storytelling, if the camera's not photographing the subtext, if I don't have props that are actually important symbols representing the subtext as well, then I don't have a scene. And it reminds me, you know what? You're either missing blocking or visual story points or props that are helping you to tell the story here. So the silent take ends up working for us in so many ways in the work. Even if you have a rehearsal period, it's going to help you as well to target where the weaknesses in the scene might be.
Yeah, and in terms of blocking, that also is a really interesting part of the book when you're talking about blocking and framing and what exists within the frame, and also the idea of trying to make every scene into a oneer, and then changing it up and dividing it when you're sort of forced to, or getting extra coverage. I mean, I think the oneer is risks to some degree becoming something of a not a gadget. What's the word? A gimmick.
A stunt. Yeah, I absolutely. I agree.
Although I did recently watch I Am Cuba, the film from the 1960s, which has some single shots which are as impressive, if not far more impressive, than anything I've seen recently.
I agree. Magnificent.
So I wanted to ask about those. You talk very much about preparation. In fact, a huge amount of preparation you do in terms of knowing exactly what shots and how you're going to block a scene in multiple ways. How long does it take you to prepare for a film? I mean, especially with TV, you can't have that much time to do the preparation.
Well, in the beginning, it took longer, right? Where as I was learning the craft, and part of that, when I did that low budget period of my life, that was that really helped. So I could think on my feet. I wanted to be able to think on my feet really quickly, and so now it's partly my level of experience allows me to move very quickly on a scene that that I may have I want 3 to 5 versions of it, and usually I do know that the first version of a scene is not the most interesting, or it's something I've seen in someone else's movie, and it feels right because it is right. It works because someone else figured it out. So I'm really trying to go from what is probably just what's sitting in the very front of my brain and move myself through the work so that I get something that is going to not just be interesting or tell the story, but actually be entertaining. And then the last, maybe the 5th version, if I can get it there, is a unique version of it. So it's a process of moving through, and I can, because I know how my brain works these days, I have enough experience, I can do that pretty quickly. Even on a television set where you've got on a standard show, you've got 7 days of prep and 8 days of shooting, and so I can do that pretty quickly. But that's only because of experience and shooting a lot. I don't think we have. I know that I have a lot of respect for the job. I'm in awe of what it takes to do it really well. And I still, if I'm anything right now, and always have been as a student of the process, I don't feel like I've got where I want to be in terms of my control over the elements. I'm hoping I never do. I'd be really sad if I got to the point where, you know what, I figured this out. Right? There are too many moving parts that need to be coordinated in a certain way, in a certain order, at a certain time. for all of our work to come together and be its best. So I'm always looking for ways to get to those ideas quicker and faster. And because of my experience in all of those low budget films, I just learned to do it really quickly now. But it didn't happen accidentally. It was really, I was focused on that. That was the point. And that I wasn't doing those films to make a little bit of cash. They really end up paying off down the road in speed and quality at the same time.
I always have in mind those filmmakers like Rainer Fassbinder, who seem to manage to make 2 or 3 films a year. People with a huge turnover, and yet there's a French filmmaker at the moment, Quentin Dupieux, who seems to make a minimum of a film a year, and maybe even 2. Some years he's made 2, and he's got a side hustle as a musician as well. And I interviewed him once, and he was telling me, it took a month to film, less than a month to film, and then another month to edit, and it's ready. And I said, wow, a month seems a really short time to edit. And he says, he didn't understand what people were doing in editing suites for longer. He was like, why is it taking people so long? I get bored.
That's great. Yeah. I understand that feeling. Like, the editing room for me, it's tough that way.
Absolutely. Have you ever had it's a tough question, this, but I'll put you on the spot with it. Have you ever had like a nightmare situation where your maxims just don't feel like they're applying? They're not helping you out. Things are going wrong.
It's when for whatever reason on any given day, where my confidence is flagging. And we're human, and some days you get there and you're just not, you find yourself not up to the task, or the pressures somehow, either you whipped up the pressure and the stress for your own purposes, or someone else has put a lot of pressure on you, and in terms of how this needs to be shot and the importance of it and how long we have to shoot and all those things, all the standard pressures. And if you combine that with, for me, a flagging confidence, which happens all the time, despite, I've done a lot of shooting in my time. I've done a lot of plays. I've been the director. I've walked in those shoes many, 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 many times over the past 40 years, but I can still show up and be a human being and get scared. And what I learned to do is to simply try to get a really quick reset. If I'm shooting outdoors, I'll try to find something that reminds me that, this is really not all that important. So the first time it happened to me, I looked over to a tree and I saw this bird, looked like a cardinal sitting in this tree. And the bird was completely oblivious of all of this stress that I was under. And I thought, that bird doesn't have a clue. And because there really is nothing at stake here, right? After all of this is manufactured, it's all fictional. And the bird reminded me that, take a breath. It's not all that important. Just do your best work. And I started doing that more and more, where I just had to get a reset, a recheck for what is real here, what's really stressful, right? What is really dangerous? What is really, do you really stand to lose something? And what isn't? And I do that inside too, right? Just looking at simple moments between people on set, right? Two people can be talking at a distance, and just the way the light catches down, something that says, okay, just take a breath. None of this is really that important, and you're going to get through it. And that helps me to reset. It helps me to put the focus on the humanity that's taking place, and the simplicity of what we're doing, and the sheer privilege it is to be pointing a camera at two people, right, creating a fictional scene and making a living at it. That is a thing of great beauty to have that opportunity, and just settling down and stripping away ego and expectations and vanity. That's where all of that stress really comes from. And it gives me a chance to just reset and move on. But those can be crippling moments where you start to doubt yourself, especially around 150 people. You know, you're on the spot.
Absolutely, and everybody's looking at you as the director, And I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. On the cover of your book, you have like a compass, and that feels like, you know, something you take out of your pocket when you're lost, and
That's correct.
point in the right direction. It'll give you, at least you'll know where north is.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly it.
I was intrigued when you said you were moving towards documentary, and you sort of gave a part of your motivation. You said, until we find out what's settled, you know, until things settle and we find out what's going on. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think we're at a point where no one is really quite sure where where the industry is headed.
Right.
Partly because all the new business models and streaming, and partly because of AI, and everyone seems to be spinning out of control, making decisions not based on quality or content, but making decisions based on what they think they should do. So for me, the moving into documentary is more about you're not selling a piece of fiction. You're selling something that is more concrete. In many cases, it's intellectual property, and people are more willing to take risks like that because it's something that they can kind of hold in their hands. If you're trying to invent or create something new, we're going through such an uncertain period that investors are not likely to take the leap with you. So this is, again, just kind of sitting back and looking at the 5-year plan, seeing that I've got to go through another transition, because I don't think any of us we're not guaranteed an entire lifetime in movies. A handful of people are. The rest of us have to engineer it. We have to be willing to read what's going on, to be able to pivot, to understand how the industry is moving, and to be ahead of it. So I'm not scared of all the fear of AI and what's that going to do to our industry and to our creators. It's like, no, this has been happening since the invention of sound, and probably before that. So our job now is we have a purpose. Our purpose is to tell stories to help our fellow human beings. We have to pivot and learn the new approach. In the meantime, while all of that's kind of being sorted through, I still want to continue to make product. I don't want to get lost in it. So for me, the documentary is a much easier thing to sell, because it's got a built-in, if you choose your ideas well, right, it's got a built-in self-promotion, and that's real life.
And I suspect, although you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's the challenge for you is that it's a new discipline for you to learn.
Yes, absolutely, and that's really an exciting part. You know, because it is so different, and you're following a story. You're not driving the story. You're trying to find where that story is most interesting and most impactful. So yeah, it's a little it keeps me off balance in a big way, and that's why I really appreciate and respect it to be able to after 40 plus years in the industry to still be, you know, a beginner, right? That's hard to do. It's hard to find those opportunities, and this is that for me.
Excellent. I can't wait to see what you come up with, what your next work is.
Well, thank you.
Finally, I'd like to ask you for a recommended book, a book which, or more than one, a book which our listeners might be interested in terms of film, cinema, and related topics.
Sure. I think the one that I've just picked up again recently, that, you know, I read probably maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I can't remember which, was the dark, because I don't read much fiction. I'm a nonfiction person. The Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, Team of Rivals. And, I'm reading it for a couple of reasons. It really kind of reinforms me about, Lincoln's approach to leadership and how he forged a team of enemies, of rivals that were able to, in that interaction, that recipe of minds, of sensibilities that he got to kind of orchestrate, created one of the best governments and functioning governments in a time of time of war. And that is, I think that's important for me to read, not only as a filmmaker, but looking at the situation we have here in the U.S. today, is to see and respect the kind of leadership that we're capable of, not just in movies, but in our world politics, is really refreshing, and it puts me at ease to know that that's possible. And also, I like to steal those basic principles of leadership. Right, it's not putting a bunch of yes men around you. It's something quite different. The other book, kind of similar. Well, it's just that it's nonfiction, is David McCullough's book, The Great Bridge, which kind of chronicles the building of the Brooklyn Bridge. And it's fascinating, and it's emotional, surprisingly emotional. The thought process, the creative process that went into building it, all of the pains and tragedies that were associated with it for the designers of the bridge, that family. So it combines, while being nonfiction, it combines the essence of creativity, what it takes to bring something together, the nature of that type of leadership, and process. So in many ways, it speaks to me as an artist. Because of the process.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's really interesting as well that you're looking outside of film, outside of cinema, but it's always bringing back lessons as well that can inform your work.
Yeah. It's there's so many great lessons. I also do that with I sculpt a little, and I do woodworking a little, because I think it's all. The process for me is all the thought process really fascinates me, and how we move through the creation of something that did not exist before we started work on it, and how along the way we're able to shift our ideas and adjust based on new challenges, new information, and working in wood and clay. I really have, it's all in front of you, right? It's not random thoughts. It's you can see the progress, and you can make assessments, and you can steal those ideas when I do my work as a filmmaker. Same process, a different medium, but all the same job.
Yeah, it's a sort of cross-fertilization between different things. I do think that anyone who's trying for a career in any sort of artistic endeavor does well to have other apparently unrelated interests, which will always, play sport or something, do something which will feed in and inform your art. Because if you're a true artist, everything will inform your art anyway.
That's correct. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. Very well said.
Thank you so much, Rob. Let me just finally recommend to everyone Film TV Director's Field Manual, 70 Maxims to Change Your Filmmaking by Rob Spera. I'll put a link so you can get yourself a copy of that. I would highly recommend it. I know, as I said before, there are some people who are making their own films who are listening to this. And I don't think there's anybody who who is doing that, who wouldn't benefit from reading this book. And also, as personally, as someone who isn't making a film, maybe something in the pipeline, but I can't talk about that. But anyway, as someone who isn't making his own film or directing a film, I still found it really fascinating just to get that perspective of the director. And that I think it's really important for people who write about film and critics to also know about production, because otherwise you make some bafflingly stupid ideas. See earlier discussion of auteur theory.
Thank you, John. It's a delight spending time with you. I really appreciate it.